Whoa, whoa, hold your horses, boy, damn. Leroy says he smells fear, and he loves the smell of that. And well, today's movie is scary, but not in the supernatural, paranormal, ooh, spooky wooky type of way. It's scary in the sense that the worst, most heinous, debauched parts of this movie are entirely human, or entirely from humans and the human mind. Most likely a break in the human psyche. And you know, I and Leroy will watch anything with James McAvoy in it. God tier actor. God tier. No one can play a psycho like James McAvoy, as you're about to see today. We're first introduced to the Dalton family, which consists of Ben the dad, Louise the mom, and Agnes the 12-year-old daughter. And they're off vacationing in Italy. Ooh. And while they're vacationing, they meet a couple whose names are Paddy and Ciara. And they have their son Ant with them, who cannot speak because Paddy tells them he has a condition that makes his tongue smaller, or a condition that one of the symptoms is he has an underdeveloped tongue. I ain't never heard of it, but I ain't heard of much. So after they cross paths, they start vacationing together and befriend each other, and they have a pretty good time in their week together in Italy. Wouldn't anyone? I would just need for someone to pay for my entire round trip to Italy and all my amenities and room and board. I don't ask for much. Now the Daltons are an American family, but they just recently moved over to London. So after their week in Italy is over, that is where they return to. And sometime after returning home, they receive a postcard from Paddy and Ciara, inviting all the Daltons for a stay at their remote farmhouse located in Devon, which is in England. And upon finally agreeing that it would be a good change of scenery, the Daltons decide to go. And upon arriving to Paddy and Ciara's farmhouse, they receive a good old warm welcome, where they get them settled into their rooms immediately and get them ready for dinner. And Paddy and Ciara pulled out all the stops, because in celebration of the occasion, Paddy went and butchered and prepared their prized goose named Libby. Oh. Especially for their arrival. Despite the fact that in Italy, however long ago, Louise had mentioned to Paddy and Ciara that she's actually vegetarian. So right off the bat, Paddy seems a little domineering and controlling. Because even though Louise doesn't remind him that she's a vegetarian, and he very well could have forgotten, he coerces Louise to take the first honorary bite of Goose Libby over here. And wanting to be polite to her gracious hosts, she accepts the bite and that's real good, before spitting it out when he turns away. And Paddy and Ciara own a really nice, massive property on the countryside, and Paddy tells them that he's a doctor, so I guess it makes sense that he can afford that, right? After dinner, when Ben takes out the trash, he runs into Ant, who is trying to tell him something, but, Ant obviously cannot speak. Right before Paddy comes over and interrupts and scurries Ant off the bed. So when the kids are both in bed, and for the stay they'll be sharing Ant's room, the parents are downstairs hanging out and a couple of them are smoking. When Louise picks up on the sound of Ant screaming or crying or yelling from upstairs, and of course she gets disconcerted by this, because right off the bat, even this early into the movie, you can tell Louise is 100% a helicopter parent. To be fair, Agnes does have an anxiety disorder, but Louise just babies her too much. And because of this anxiety disorder, Agnes has a stuffed animal rabbit called Hoppy, and she relies heavily on its company and its presence. But Agnes is real attached to Hoppy, so remember that. Anyway, when Louise gets concerned about the yelling and screaming from Ant, Paddy assures her that no, it's just part of his condition, he's not in any pain, he's fine, it will stop in a minute. Which it does. So the next day, Paddy and Ciara and Ant show the Daltons around their expansive, massive, beautiful property, and then they stop for a brief bite to eat. And there's a moment where Ant is slightly disobedient and doesn't move when Paddy tells him to, and he yanks him out of the way, which sets off a red flag for Louise and Ben, like, you're gonna treat your son like that? So it kind of elicits a sense of awkward tension, which is only worsened and made more awkward when Paddy offers to give Louise a neck massage because she has a stiff, complaining neck. Like, that massage is a little too intimate and goes on a little too long. So they're barely a day into their stay at the farmhouse, and already Ben and Louise are picking up some oddities among Paddy and Ciara. After that, the group heads to the lake, to a rock overhang where they're gonna jump off into the water, woo! Honestly, that kinda looks fun. And as soon as they get there, Paddy and Ciara start nonchalantly taking off their clothes and stripping down to their underwear. And they're like, oh, it's fine, you don't need a bathing suit. So the Daltons all follow suit. Kind of, except Louise, who is a little weirded out by it and keeps her jeans on. And when Ciara takes her shirt off, Louise notices some bruising on her ribs, and she says, oh, I just fell off the ladder in the orchard. So then everyone but Louise and Ciara jump into the lake, and it's quite a height, but it looks fun regardless, despite the fact that Paddy said, watch out for the rocks. And as soon as they're in the water, Ant is thrashing and trying to stay afloat and panicking. So they're like, can Ant swim? And Paddy's like, yeah. He's learning the age-old way of sink or swim. So no, Ant cannot swim. But after a moment of thrashing about, Paddy eventually holds on to him. Thank goodness. So back at the house, when Ben and Louise are back in their shared room, it's clear that Louise is not loving their stay there so far and is picky about the accommodations and the fact that there's like a stain on their bedsheet. And she's also a little unsettled by them and their country rural outlook on things and their mannerisms. Like Paddy and Ciara off the bat are a little odd. So Louise just kind of wants to leave. But right then, Ben and Louise's discussion on wanting to leave is abruptly ended when Ciara shows up at their door, where she invites them out to dinner for that night. But when the Daltons are all dressed and ready to go out for dinner, they realize that the dinner is intended for just the adults, just the parents, right as a random rough around the edges friend of Paddy comes over to babysit the kids. And to Louise and Ben, he's just some random dude. But Paddy and Ciara assure her, oh no, he's great with kids, he was a school teacher, A-okay. Still, anyway, maybe that's just me, but... So Louise begrudgingly leaves Agnes and Aunt with a babysitter, and then they all head off to dinner. So their dinner takes place at a quaint little isolated restaurant, where tonight they're gonna be the only diners, because Paddy is friends with the owner, Mike, so he gives them the hookups, I guess. And when they sit down, Louise reminds them that she is in fact vegetarian, and that's where Paddy apologizes for the night before when he force-fed her that piece of Libby. But then right after that apology, he starts grilling her on her decision to continue eating fish regardless of her vegetarianism, as Louise is trying to back up her claims and stand up for herself, and Ben is kind of just sitting there quietly, because it seems out of the two of them, Louise is the outspoken one. Now back at the farmhouse, the babysitter is counting down from the other room, I guess they're playing hide and seek, and Aunt uses that opportunity to take Agnes into Paddy and Ciara's room, where he opens, gosh, like an old rusty engine, where he pulls out a drawer and shows Agnes Paddy's expensive watch collection, picking up and showing her one in particular that has a foreign language inscribed into the back of it. And Agnes is nothing more than confused. And back at the dinner, Paddy and Ciara are revealing themselves to be a very odd, eccentric, weird, little bit irky type of couple. Especially Paddy, his emotions are all over the place all the time. He just seems like a very unstable person, to say the least. Paddy and Ciara are just overly open, way too open, give way too many TMIs that you know Ben and Louise did not ask for. And if it weren't weird and awkward after that, it gets worse, because Paddy and Ciara start role-playing or faking a sex act right there at the dinner table, right in front of Ben and Louise. And they're just kind of sitting there like, yeah. But Paddy and Ciara find it hilarious and one big joke, and ugh. And Louise is also weirded out by the fact that they've been married 17 years and Ciara does not look that old. Not to mention that after the uncomfortable, awkward dinner, Paddy leaves Ben with a bill. So as Agnes and Aunt are getting ready for bed back at the farmhouse, Aunt shows Agnes a bunch of bruises he has on his stomach and all around his torso, right before they hear the parents who have just arrived home coming up the stairs to check on them. So they both hurry back to their own respective beds and pretend to be asleep. So Ben and Louise get settled back in their own room, where they break into an argument about Louise's past infidelity that happened around 6 months ago. She was apparently sexting some guy. So it wasn't a full-blown affair, but it still was cheating. And then, of course, this argument branches off into other grievances they hold against the other partner, But it all ends with them hugging it out. Isn't that sweet? So much later into the night, when everyone else is asleep, Louise gets up to check on Agnes, but when she goes to Aunt in Agnes's shared room, neither of them are in their beds. Concerned, Louise goes downstairs to look for them and heads over to Paddy and Ciara's room, and she is horrified to find all four of them sleeping in Paddy and Ciara's bed, including her daughter Agnes. So Louise is absolutely appalled, but silently so, and she quietly wakes up Agnes and takes her out without waking up the others, and then rushes Agnes back to her and Ben's room, and as soon as she does, Louise wakes up Ben and tells him they're leaving right then and right there, most likely then informing him about what she just saw. So quietly and secretly and swiftly, they all pack up their stuff and load it in the car, and after they've gotten in the car and made their getaway, that's when Agnes starts freaking out and throwing a tantrum that she can't find Hoppy, that stupid stuffed rabbit of hers. And Ben's a little pissed that Agnes is freaking out about it, because he thinks that at age 12, she should be over this stuffed animal dependence and reliance, and he's sick of it. But Agnes starts throwing a real fit about turning back around and getting Hoppy, we forgot him, to the point where she almost makes them crash, and she throws enough of a fit that Ben turns around and they head back toward the farmhouse, and back to look around. So as soon as they're back at the farmhouse, Ben tells him to wait in the car, that he'll go look around and look for the stupid Hoppy. But shortly thereafter, Louise gets out of the car and follows into the house after him, entering the kitchen to find Ben in somewhat of a confrontation with Paddy and Ciara, and it looks like they just woke up to this. And Paddy's demanding to know why they left in the middle of the night like that and without telling them. So because Ben is not really a confrontational type of person, He's skirting around the real reason they left, and kind of rigging up other excuses. So Louise has to step in and tell them the real reason, and that she's not happy about it, and says the line was definitely crossed. And Ciara gets all apologetic about it, and she says Paddy had no idea that she brought Agnes in after he fell asleep. And then Ciara kind of breaks down and tells her that she's just overprotective because they used to have a daughter who died at 12 weeks. So Ciara says that when she heard Agnes crying in the middle of the night and apparently calling for Louise, who didn't hear her and, quote, didn't come, Cara's motherly instincts took over and she brought the kids into the bed with them to comfort them, or something. And right as Ciara is tearfully apologizing for, I guess, making the wrong decision there, Agnes rushes in the room, saying that Aunt found Hoppy. Woo! Crisis averted! And now that the situation has been cleared up a little bit, the Daltons decide to stay. So later on, the moms are outside chilling together, the kids are painting eggs, and the dads have gone off fox hunting. But I like foxes. I think they're cute. And while the kids are painting eggs with both the moms in close proximity, Aunt slips Agnes a note, except it's written in a foreign language. It kind of looks Danish. Not that I speak Danish or Dane. And Agnes obviously does not either because she's hella confused. And just then Ciara starts walking over to them toward the table where they're painting eggs. So Aunt quickly snatches a note and starts eating it. So Agnes is confused and sussed out. She's starting to sense that there's something very wrong going on. Afterward, when everyone is back in the kitchen together and Louise is helping to prepare lunch, she accidentally cuts her finger and has to rush it under the sink. And Ben asks Paddy to look at it since Paddy's a doctor. And Paddy's like, what? I'm not a doctor. And Ben and Louise are like, that's what you said in Italy. And that's when Paddy acquiesces and he says, you know, sometimes I get self-conscious and I want to make good impressions on people, so I kind of just lie. And he tells them, I actually have no job at all. I don't believe in working. I just sell marijuana and cider to the neighbors. Whatever helps us get by. But right when Ben and Louise get real disconcerted and real sussed out, that's when he reveals he's joking. It's one big massive joke. Of course he's a doctor, right? And they all laugh it off together. So was him saying he's not a doctor a joke? Or was it a mere slip-up? Anyway, when they're all outside at the picnic table having lunch together, Ciara starts really nitpicking and parenting how Agnes is eating. Like a little too much and going a little overboard, and this pisses Louise off. And she's like, can you stop parenting my child, please? Focus on Aunt. And that's when Paddy explains that Ciara grew up in the foster system, so she's used to parenting other kids and I guess teaching them table manners. And the situation is already a little tense and awkward, but of course Paddy makes it worse by forcing Ciara to apologize to Louise, and then to Agnes, making Louise give a response in turn. And Louise is kind of like, oh, I guess I overreacted a little bit? Is that what you're wanting of me? What do you want me to say? So Paddy's got some hella domineering control issues. He just seems like such a toxic person. This next scene is kind of sad, but at the same time, low-key hilarious. Low-key. Because as they're all continuing to eat their lunch and recover from that awkward moment, Agnes tells them that her and Aunt came up with a dance and that they want to perform it for them. To the beautiful ballad of Cotton Eye Joe. So they put the music on for them, and as soon as Aunt and Agnes start performing their routine, Aunt's a little lackluster in his energy, and Paddy notices straight away calls it out. Like, whoa, 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 whoa. Turns the music off and starts hurling immediate criticism at Aunt. And he's like, Aunt, what was that? You're completely out of time with the music. Ugh. And obviously Ben and Louise are completely appalled. Like, what? Because they're just over there enjoying the kids' performance. Because, you know, kids performing, it's not gonna be great. It's just meant to be cute. Okay? So Paddy is completely disgusted by Aunt's performance and makes them start over again. But as soon as they start over, Paddy is just as pissed with Aunt. So he angrily stops the music again. And Ben and Louise are kind of like, what's wrong with you? And Paddy's just over there frustrated and angry and pissed off. And he says to them, he has no rhythm. He is spoiling that routine. Poor Aunt. So he makes them start again. And he is just as pissed at Aunt again. Poor Aunt. And he rushes over to Aunt and starts roughly controlling his feet to feel the beat. Aunt, you're so bad at it. And so Paddy's spur of the moment, unwarranted tantrum ruins the vibe. And Agnes does not want to do it again. She's out. She's like, I don't want to do it anymore, Mom. But then Paddy gets super insistent, like, no, you gotta finish the routine. They've gotta finish the routine, don't they? So to keep the peace and to keep Paddy from exploding, Ben urges Agnes to perform one more time, and Louise isn't happy about that. So the kids both get up there, power to them, and start performing again amid all this tension. And of course Paddy is pissed at Aunt again, and Ciara is trying to console his anger, but Paddy's frustration gets to the point where he picks up food and throws it at Aunt. And of course, Louise and Ben are both shocked and disturbed and they can't believe what they just beheld. And Louise and Ben are telling Paddy off, like, how could you treat your son like that? He's a little kid. But Paddy is still worked up and absolutely livid. And he screams at Aunt to go to your room! Poor little guy. Poor Aunt. So Cara has to go and put Paddy down for a post-tantrum nap. What? To cool down, I guess, and he immediately falls to sleep. And Louise goes over to Ben and she says, all right, that is it. That is the actual straw that broke the camel's back. We're out of here. We need to leave. But Ben tells her they can't really drive because both of them have consumed way too much alcohol. So he tells her that yes, as soon as we sober up, we're out of here. What about Aunt, though? But then Cara comes back over to Louise and is begging her not to go while Paddy's still asleep because he'll get very angry. And Cara loosely implies that he'll take his anger out on her and Aunt. And Louise is like, oh, it's that bad? Shoot. So right then, Aunt sneaks off into Paddy's room, and thank goodness Paddy is still asleep. So Aunt cautiously and sneakily, and at the risk of death, unhooks the keyring from Paddy's belt and tiptoes out. And then he goes back outside to Agnes and ushers him to follow him into this type of locked shed. And after carefully unlocking the shed and ushering Agnes in after him, he moves a bunch of straw and hay on the ground aside, revealing a cellar door. So at Aunt's beckoning, they both head down into this cellar room. And it appears to be a type of storage room, stacked with hordes of miscellaneous belongings everywhere. And then Aunt pulls out a photo book, and he opens to a page that has a photo of him sitting next to a couple, seated near Paddy and Cara, and a little girl. And it appears they're all vacationing together. And then Aunt flips to the next page, which is a photo of that same little girl with her actual parents photographed next to Paddy and Cara, who have a little boy with them. A completely different little kid. And the picture book goes on and on with the same pattern. So Aunt is not Paddy and Cara's actual child, but one they stole from a previous family, a previous couple they met while vacationing, and, subsequently befriended. And, of course, Aunt cannot speak, so he could not tell them before now, and this all explains why Aunt is so uncomfortable and timorous around the couple, especially Paddy, because he's not even their son, and also because Paddy treats him like crap. And flipping back to the photo of Aunt with his parents, Aunt has his tongue out in the picture and points to it, and then points to his own mouth and makes a cutting gesture. So it's pretty safe to assume that Aunt does not have a condition that gave him a small, underdeveloped tongue. His tongue was in fact cut off to keep his silence. What a lovely family. So of course Agnes is horrified, but Aunt gestures for her to take some photos on her phone, so Agnes pulls out her phone and does indeed take photos of the photo book to use as evidence to show her parents. So they leave that cellar of horrors and leave the shed, and Aunt makes sure to cover up their tracks and relock the door. And then Aunt has to sneak back into Paddy's room to return the keyring. Except when Aunt makes it back to the room, he realizes that Paddy is now indeed awake. So Aunt is immediately stricken with terror. And of course, Paddy, who's just woken up, is grumpy and rude. And Paddy is so volatile and all over the place because in that moment, after being grumpy and rude to Aunt, he demands that Aunt gives him a hug. Show me love. Ew. So Aunt, who has the keys grasped behind his back, has to give Paddy a hug, but keeps the keys in a death grip so they don't jingle while they're behind Paddy's neck. And then Paddy shoves him away before getting to his feet. Then Aunt starts making oink noises to signify that he wants a piggyback, I guess. And since Paddy decides it would look better for their tainted image, he complies begrudgingly, giving Aunt the perfect opportunity to reattach the keyring right before jumping on his back. Whew. So Agnes is still outside and trying to figure out how to tell her parents what she just discovered, but she finally stumbles across an idea. She goes out among the trees and grabs a thorn and then cuts on her thigh so she has blood running down her leg to make it look like she just got her period. And then Agnes comes over with that blood on her leg and on her dress, and Ben's like, oh, did you cut yourself? And Louise is like, no. This is a little more than that. So Louise, who is all calm and understanding about it, escorts Agnes to the bathroom. But as soon as they get inside the bathroom and shut the door, Agnes immediately rips out her phone and shows her mom the picture she got from that photo book. So Louise is obviously freaked out, but kind of has to keep that contained as to not freak out Agnes even more. So she makes Agnes lock herself in the bathroom as Louise goes calmly over to Ben. And since Ben is in front of Paddy and Cara, Louise has to make it look all calm and casual and like, hey, Agnes is asking for Ben because, he's better in these emotional moments like this. And then Louise just as calmly and collectedly brings Ben back inside and takes him to their room. And then she lets her guard down a bit and starts freaking out and showing him the photos, and he's obviously freaked out by it. So they're trying to figure out what to do and how to subtly get their way out of there. And Louise is digging through the room and finds herself a box cutter and then stashes it in her pocket just in case she needs some self-defense. So now that Ben, Louise, and Agnes are all back in the room together, they devise a story or a plan to get out of there. So they decide to tell Paddy and Ciara that Agnes just got her period and she's freaking out about it and wants to go home and, kind of wants to chill out in her own bed. Understandable, because just in general, strangers' beds are ew. I hate hotels. I hate anything like that. I like my bed, okay? I like my bed. And Agnes is there and indeed looking a little spooked, or a lottle spooked. So they kind of just bluff their way out of there, acting as calm and collected and nonchalant about the whole situation as possible, and apologetic. Oh, we're sorry to cut our trip short, but we really should be going. And when they finally all stiffly head out to their car, trying to act casual, they're almost free, they're almost out of there, so they only have to keep up the act a couple moments more. Just then, they notice that the back tire of their car is flat. Because of course it is. And Paddy's like, shoot, that's really, really bad luck. Dang. Who's buying that? I'm not. I ain't buying what you're selling. Paddy does indeed end up fixing the tire. By this point, based on the tension coming from both sides, it's kind of safe to assume that Paddy and Ciara either think or know that the Daltons have become aware to the actual situation going on here. Like, Paddy is no fool. He may be psycho and volatile and everything in between, but he ain't no fool. So it's a facade coming from both sides. So in the midst of so much unspoken tension, they all hug goodbye. Paddy's hug toward Louise, aggressive and weirdly long-winded, and just weird in general because he kisses her neck twice. Ew, what the hell? It's creepy as hell, but Louise does not care. She just wants out. She'll do whatever it takes to get them closer to the car. And that heavy, fake, amiable facade between the two couples, between the two families, it cracks a little more when the Daltons are about to get in their car finally, just as Paddy accuses them of cryptically not entirely being honest yet. So dodging the real unspoken truth here, that the Daltons now know of the situation and need to get the hell out of there, Louise takes another honesty route and instead confesses her infidelity, stating it happened because she was deeply unhappy in their marriage. So Paddy wanted truth and he got it. In fact, he looks impressed or appeased. And he's like, now that's some honesty right there. Honesty is a good thing. And they're like, yeah, bye. So they all finally pack into the car and start driving toward the gate, which is remote controlled, and Paddy opens it for them. And Agnes is getting upset to her parents because she's like, what about Aunt? We can't leave Aunt. And Louise tells her, yeah, well, we need to go get help first. We need to leave and come back for Aunt. And just as their car is nearing the open gate, Agnes looks back to see Paddy push Aunt into the lake. And remember, Aunt cannot swim. And Paddy and Ciara have the most smug, self-satisfied looks on their faces, ew. So Ben quickly stops the car and gets out, and he tells Louise, just take off, just leave, I'll go and try to save Aunt. So Ben leaps into the lake to try and save Aunt, and right as Louise gets over to the driver's seat and tries to speed out of there, Paddy closes the gate. At that point, I would just try backing up and ramming my damn car through it. Or in my case, I guess my scooter. I don't think that would work as well. And it's at this point that we see Ciara is not so innocent and timorous and a victim. She's just as nuts as him. So after Ben rescues Aunt and starts pulling him out of the lake, Paddy and Ciara come over, holding Agnes and Louise at gunpoint. And then by persuasion of gunpoint, they bring the whole family back into that tool shed where they're forcing them to transfer all their money over to them. And the Daltons apparently have around $200,000 in their bank account. 200,000? So they're forcing the Daltons to transfer all their money over to them. And Paddy says that Mike, who's the owner of the restaurant where they ate at that one night, he tells them Mike already has a buyer in line for their car, and that Paddy will be making the Daltons send an email to their landlord and the school saying they're moving or something shady like that. So they have this all planned out. And Paddy's like, well, this is all your fault that you're back here. Should've just let Aunt drown. Saying that Aunt would've just ended up down there with his parents. So are all their past victims just drowned in the lake? I don't know. I don't think I want to know. And Ben asks them, like, why are you doing this? To which Paddy responds, because you let us. And they kinda did. And then Paddy fills a syringe with a sedative, just as Louise subtly retrieves a box cutter she's had stowed in her pocket. And right as Paddy is about to inject her, she pivots around and slashes him in the face with that box cutter. Right before getting up to fight Ciara for the rifle. So Louise manages to wrestle the gun away from Ciara altogether, and now Ciara and Paddy are the ones at gunpoint, except Paddy's on the ground writhing in pain because of his face. And that's when Ciara tries to plead and play victim, and that he's making me do this, I had to do it, please, take me with you. Right as Aunt grabs the keyring from Paddy's belt, and they all hurry out of there, and that's when Ciara reveals to them that she was actually Paddy's first victim, and that when she was taken, she was the age of Agnes. Which explains why Ciara and Paddy have such a massive age gap. And so I guess Ciara has a case of Stockholm Syndrome, on drugs, on crack. But Louise ain't having it and steps out, and Ben locks the door with Ciara and Paddy inside, and they all race back to their car with Aunt, just as Mike, who is the owner of that restaurant, pulls up at the property and starts shooting at them. So they all rush over to the main house because they know there's a landline inside, and get in and lock all the doors and windows, just as Mike heads over to the shed and releases Paddy and Ciara. So Louise quickly dials 999, not 911, because keep in mind they're in England still. Which explains why the wheel is on the wrong side. Anyway, but right as Louise is dialing 999, that's when Ciara, who's now freed, disconnects the phone line from outside. So now they're even more screwed. So they all rush into a room in the house and barricade the door, and then to make everything infinitely worse, the power shuts off. Because of Ciara again. So yeah, she's really the victim here. So by the light of their phones, they find Paddy's alcohol stash, taking a bottle to make a Molotov cocktail, because their spur-of-the-moment plan is to set the barn on fire, which is the building right next door to them, in hopes that it raises up enough smoke and fire that people can see it from the road, therefore attracting potential help. And then all of a sudden, the power kicks back on. The electricity is back. And as I always say, if it's too good to be true, it probably is. So after Ben makes that Molotov cocktail, they open the window and throw it on top of the barn, but it just rolls off the roof and then hits Paddy's car below. And then shortly thereafter, Paddy's car explodes. And Paddy is not too happy about that. Paddy ain't too pleased. And that's when Paddy breaks his way into the house with them, pistol in hand. Or, no. And then Ciara breaks in through the cellar into the basement, and then frickin' Mike, who's on the roof, breaks in through the attic window. So now all three of those evil people are now inside the house with the Daltons. And all three of them have guns. So Louise quickly hides the kids in a cupboard and tries to run for cover. And by this point, Paddy's just infuriated and he is on a beeline hunt to kill them all. So all three of them are now in the house and looking for the Daltons, plus Aunt. And as Paddy cracks open a cupboard looking for Aunt and Agnes, Louise ambushes him and sprays him in the face with drain cleaner. For quite some time, too. So now that Paddy's eyes are nearly burned out of their sockets, this gives the kids the opportunity to run out of the bathroom past Paddy, and Louise follows after them. And then further out in the house, Ben, who is in hiding, attacks Mike with a hammer, except it doesn't go all too well for Mike, who almost gets an eye full of glass. That is, until Louise comes over, grabs the hammer, and plunges the back of it into Mike's head. And, unsurprisingly, Mike then keels over dead. So 1 down, 2 to go. So after hearing all Paddy's screams, Ciara has rushed up to the bathroom and is spraying the shower head over Paddy's face and especially his eyes, and he's screaming. But then Paddy takes over the hosing and tells her to go after them, so Ciara heads out after the Daltons with that rifle. So the Daltons plus Aunt have all made their way to the loft and have climbed their way out onto the roof, right as Ciara appears at the window with the rifle and is aiming to shoot them. But before Ciara can even get a round off, Louise, who is standing off to the side, grabs a roof tile and then cracks it over Ciara's head, which sends Ciara tumbling off the roof, then all the way to the ground. And I think it's pretty safe to assume that Ciara looks pretty dead. But in her descent, Ciara also knocked the ladder down, so now they're semi-screwed. So once everyone has been safely positioned back on the roof, Ben gets an idea. A horrible one, but the only idea he has left and can have left at this point, because, you know, as Ciara now knows firsthand, they're actually very high off the ground. But despite that, Ben decides to jump down himself and cracks an ankle, because it's really their last option at this point. And even though Ben's ankle is very broken, he manages to prop the ladder back up so his family plus Aunt can get down. And Agnes is the first down, so he tells her, hurry, go to the car, as he helps the others back to the ground. And after Louise and Aunt are down, he picks up the rifle now that Ciara has no use for it. But in that same moment, an enraged, livid Paddy comes around the corner with Agnes in his grip, holding her at gunpoint. And that's where he sees that Ciara is in fact dead. His love is dead. The girl he kidnapped 17 years ago. And since Paddy has a gun to Agnes's head, I guess he gets to call the shots, and he tells Ben to throw the rifle over to him, and given no other option, Ben does. And Paddy says that since they killed Ciara, he's gonna take Agnes to take her place and replace her. Agnes will take care of him now. So this guy is insane with what? Pedophilic tendencies? As if he couldn't get worse. And as Paddy is about to shoot Louise and Ben, Agnes stabs Paddy with that sedation syringe that she happened to grab from earlier when it was dropped, you know, after his face was sliced. So pretty quickly, a little too quickly, in my opinion, anyway, Paddy goes down and starts losing mobility, and as Paddy drops to the ground and has lost use of his limbs, Ben comes over to point the rifle at Paddy, but only to point the rifle at Paddy because he ends up deciding not to shoot Paddy and to let him leave with his life. Hello? What? They always do that in horror movies. My gosh. And that never ceases to piss me off. And you know who else that pisses off? Aunt and Leroy. But in this context, Aunt. Because Aunt is thinking not so fast, because Aunt picks up that heavy roofing tile and holds it up over Paddy's head, and because Paddy is so sick and twisted, he's like, that's my boy. Right before Aunt brings the tile down to smash it on Paddy's head, and repeatedly, all the while screaming his frustrations out and freaking out the Daltons. And after that, they all settle into their car, hella traumatized, hella shaken up, and they slowly drive away from that nightmare hellscape that they just narrowly survived and rescued Aunt from. And Aunt is probably very relieved to be out of that hell. And then it cuts to black. And you know what? I like this movie a whole lot. It's just a solid idea. I can't really say it's a fresh one because it was made from a movie made in 2022. It was a remake of a 2022 movie. So. The original was a foreign film, so I guess they assumed no one had seen it, so I don't know. But it is such a good watch. Sure, there are points where it's a little slow, like it has a lot of slow burn and a lot of build-up, but I feel like the ending makes it worth it. And what especially makes it worth it is James McAvoy's performance. As always, stellar performance. He is one scary dude. Or at least he plays scary dudes, insane dudes, very well. A little too well. And you know that if James McAvoy is playing the main antagonist, it's gonna be one hell of a good movie. Or at the very least, one hell of a great performance. And it was. This movie's less gory and brutal in that way, but it's a lot more sinister and kind of evil and insidious, if you will. And I think all you guys should watch it. Leroy agrees. Clyde agrees. Somewhat. He's a little bit of a wimp when it comes to scary movies, but this one wasn't even that brutal, really. Leroy has seen way worse. He's seen way worse. But solid movie. 10 out of 10 recommend. And let me know what you guys think of it, okay? Let us know. Maybe not Clyde. Just us two.